Dr. Robbie, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so glad to meet you. We met at the Genius Network, and it was absolutely amazing. We sat down, and it just was an organic conversation. One of the few people I met, and actually we weren't selling each other or anything. We were literally talking about single-parent issues. And we said we're going to get back together, whether in New Jersey or here in Arizona, and I'm so excited. And I would love you to tell my audience, mostly single parents, some stuff. Tell me who you are, and we're going to get into some details and statistics about single parents and substance abuse.
I'm Dr. Robbie Westerman. I am one of the co-founders here at Camelback Integrated Health. So my story is, I guess, like many people's stories I've met, I struggled with substance abuse as a kid, lived in a house with alcoholics and drug addicts, and I was just, I guess, prone to try that stuff out just because it was something I was so used to. It was something that I saw go on, and just growing up in that chaotic household, using substances really made me feel like I can come up for a breath of air. I felt a lot of relief, a lot of the pressures went away. And, I felt complete. It was a sense of ease and comfort I always wanted. That led me down a really bad path. And it took me a long time banging my head over and over again before I finally, figured this out.
What age were you first started using, and what did you start using?
So I first started using marijuana and alcohol when I was about 15 years old. So started out using very young, and it progressively got worse. By the age of 17, I was using amphetamines, I was using opioids, I already been to treatment centers. I think from 17 to 23, I went to 15 or 16 drug treatment centers. So I was in and out all the time. I was what they call a retread. The problem for me is what I found out and what I like to help people through is, quitting the drug is not the problem. Quitting the drug is it's the tip of the iceberg, right? So the substance is never the problem. The substance is usually the solution for the user, right? It allows them to feel, happy, useful, whole, right? When we take the substance away from that person, that's when they feel the anxiety, the fear, all that stuff kind of come up, all the adverse childhood events that came up, and that's, taking alcohol or a drug away from someone like that, they're even worse off if you don't replace it with something.
Wow. So. Well, we're seeing a lot of marijuana being legalized throughout the United States. Would you say marijuana was a gateway drug for you into other things, or does it really depend on the person?
I think it depends on the person. So we look at people's life circumstances and the environment in which they were raised. That's really going to dictate whether, a substance is going to have a profound impact, right? So when you grow up with a lot of anxiety, when you grow up with a lot of abuse or neglect, right, you're going to be probably on edge, you're going to be in fear a lot. So something like marijuana or alcohol, it's going to have a higher dopamine hit because you're going to get more ease and comfort from that substance because you're used to living traumatized for so long. So when you put that into your body, you're going to get so much relief that the amygdala says, hey, this is a very good salient experience. We need to save this. Right? So the amygdala saves the memory, right, for recall, and it's given a very high valuation, right?
Sort of the fight or flight.
The thing with people that are prone to substance abuse with the childhood trauma is there is an overvaluation of the substance. So someone like say yourself, maybe alcohol isn't as high of a valuation for you. Someone that's grown up with trauma, neglect, abuse, when they take a sip of alcohol, there's a very high valuation placed upon that. So you get a higher dopamine release, there's higher euphoria. So it all depends on the environment in which you were raised are going to dictate the valuation of that substance. So marijuana doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the substance is, sex, gambling, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. The valuation is going to be much higher just because you're used to living in such so much dysregulation and such discontentedness.
I grew up actually the same with my parents heavily into drugs and alcohol, well, step-parent and my biological mother. And so it actually kept me away from any sort of substance abuse. But sex was the new drug. That was the drug, maybe food, that sort of thing. So there's many ways to have an addiction.
The biggest thing I try to preach in my whole thing, my philosophy is how how childhood plays such a huge role in how we develop and how we're prone to, the behaviors and addiction. So the way I like to explain it is we're born with three very primal needs. Okay? Food and water. What happens if we don't have food and water?
Right.
We die.
We die.
Right? What happens if humans didn't reproduce? They would die. Mm-hmm. Right? What happens if mother has a baby and then cuts the umbilical cord and walks away from the baby? Mm-hmm. Baby would die. Right? So that's nurture. Right? So those things, reproduction, food and water, and nurture, those are very, very important innate things a human being does to die for. Right? Usually something goes wrong in that nurture piece. Right? So to nurture would be teach your child how to be a part of the tribe, how to learn their skills, their attributes, their values, how to kind of fit in, how to form meaningful relationships. Those kind of things are usually where something goes wrong. And when you're a child, you have an abundance of these things in the frontal lobe called mirror neurons.
Right.
So basically, we imitate before we understand any behavior. So we always imitate before we understand.
Right.
So a kid washing dishes in a sink like a 3-year-old, they don't understand cleanliness and hygiene, right? They're just doing what mom does. Right? They're doing what mom does. So same thing is true with how we raise our kids. So if there's neglect, abandonment, abuse, they're going to have anxiety, depression, they're going to feel inadequate, they're going to feel like they don't fit in, and it's going to set the stage, right, for what happens if you have all those things going on in your life and then you take a sip of alcohol or do a drug. How are you going to feel?
That's right, sense of relief. I actually wrote about that in my book, 10 Things I Wish I Knew as a Single Parent. I actually have a chapter that tells you your kids need you emotionally. And there are many things that you just described, actually, that would help people. How did you transition as a teenager using substances into an adult? Were you still using as an adult? Or
Yes. Yeah? Yes, I was still using as an adult. And it was tough, too, because, I was a single dad.
Oh, you were single? Okay,
single dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I ever really understood that the drugs weren't the problem. And this is what I preach to people. Like, you don't have a drug problem, you have a drug solution. You have a life problem. You have a living problem, right? So, and that's where we talk about the nurture, right? And
would you say it's self-medicating, or is that essentially
and think about it. People will drink themselves to death because, like I said, nurture, cut the umbilical cord. People will die, right, for that nurture. It's that salient, it's that important. So they're getting false nurture, right? They're getting a false sense of comfort, security, belief in themselves, adequacy. They're feeling all that stuff from the substance, and that's something to die for, right? It's one of those top needs, right? So you actually get it confabulated with alcohol in that need for nurture, and those are very powerful things, right? So that's why people will drink themselves to death.
And it's so hard for them to also quit because it is essentially soothing them and giving them the healing and the nurturing that they need.
Something to die for,
wow.
Right? People will, and that's why people drink themselves to death, right? And that's why, you talked about the emotional piece too, and it's we have this system in the brain called a reticular activating system. There's so much stuff coming at us every day that we're only consciously aware of what we're taught. So if we're raised in an environment where there's abuse, neglect, abandonment constantly, usually we have an app for attracting those kind of people into our lives because we're conscious of it, right? It's like someone points out a car to you and then you see it on the road all the time. It's the same thing. Like, we're going to tend to pick out partners that are abusive, that are, neglect, that... And it's ironic too, because I worked at a women's center in Wickenburg, and it's like the one thing that person doesn't want the most is what they attract.
Is what exactly
always.
Attract. That's right.
So.
Yes. They talk about two people, whether it's substance abuse or any sort of dysfunction, can have a room with 1,000 people, and they somehow seem to find each other.
It's like a tractor beam. Like I said, it's you pick up on the cues because you grow up with it. So it's the subtle cues, right? It's the energy. You literally feel the the vibe from coming off people, right? So you're consciously aware of it, and it's a comfortable hell, for most people. It really is.
Tell me about your single parent story.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I had my daughter Kira. She's 15 now. When I was 17 or 18 years old. So
you had her when you were 17 or 18.
Yeah. I think I was just 18.
Okay. How did you meet her mother? Were you both using at the same time?
Yeah, we were both using at the same time. Okay. And that's just a recipe for disaster, essentially. And we just couldn't ever get it together, and unfortunately she's still on her journey 15 years later, which is, heartbreaking.
The mother.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And we could never get it together. And then, for myself, there's lots of, stresses that come along with, being an addict and trying to, raise a child. There's so many stressors that come along with that, and you start to run into stuff that I notice now, role reversal, where the kids caretaking the parent, right. Or the kids,
I see that a lot.
Yeah, yes. Soothing the parent, and that's you're really not providing them, emotional safety, security, and doing those kind of things. So
why isn't love enough when you see this beautiful baby being born and you're going to have a child? Mm-hmm. Why can't love for that child cause the parent to no longer use the substance?
Well, let's go back to the elements of need, right? Food, water, reproduction, and nurture, right? So we always, we want to protect ourselves, right? Self-preservation is like number one. Yeah. So we need to make sure we're nurtured first, and by proxy with alcohol or with drugs, right? That's number one. Right, and then we're able to help the needs of others. Right, it's like Maslow's. Right, our needs need to be met first. Right, and it's a need to die for. Right, that need is that's a very salient, very important need to feel that ease and comfort. So love isn't enough because we have to feel protected first and nurtured first, and we have to use the substance to get that. Unfortunately, because we haven't worked through the root of the problem, which is the trauma.
Right. And I learned that also, even not using substances growing up. I guess I needed a sense of control because I'd witnessed my mother be out of control and my stepfather. But I recognized later that it was still damaging my heart because I was like living homeless with my kids, even though I didn't have any substance abuse issue. So that's, you're still needing to heal yourself emotionally, heal from the trauma in order to...
Yeah, lots of people
have a better life.
Lots of people have all the stuff I talked about without the substance abuse problem, right? It's I had a solution. My solution was drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
Right? So and lucky for me, I always say I'm lucky to be a drug addict because my solution came with two options: die or get better. Those are my options. Some people can not have that substance abuse piece, and they can mope on through life for a long time. And like that to me is even scarier,
Yes.
Because I was given two options, like if I keep, injecting heroin, I'm going to die, and the only option for me was to, get better because I could not live in that restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness. I could not live in that, right? I cannot be okay with that. So you don't have to have the substance abuse problem to, have the anxiety, depression, fear, self-hatred, self-loathing, all that stuff that I medicated over. You just didn't have medication.
Okay. Are there signs that the person you're with are perhaps using some sort of substance abuse? One of the things we spoke about when we met at Genius was that there's always some substance abuse going on in a single parent situation. Either the person who's no longer in the home or the single parent raising the children.
Yeah, so, I think the stat out of SAMHSA is like, I think 15% of children growing up in a house have one parent that struggles with substance abuse. So like those are very high statistics, some of the signs, obviously, changes in consciousness you see. So maybe the parent is, we call it nodding off, or money is constantly being missing from the account with no explanation. They're out late. They are frequently late or don't attend commitments. And then a lot of detachment. So a lot of detachment from just family events, involvement in school activities, involvement in helping the kids with homework, because they're so fixated on either finding the means to using, or being inebriated, and all this. That's pretty much the whole life of an addict. Okay. They're focusing on how am I going to get more? How am I going to get a fix? And when they're in that fix, they're disconnected. Right. And it's ironic too, because many of these people feel like, hey, like I need the drug so I can be present. So it's like, hey, I need to, there's basically saying I need to disengage to engage, right?
Yes.
Makes no sense,
Yeah.
right?
You just have the confidence, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a former roommate, and she said her son's father actually was using cocaine, and she didn't even know it.
Yeah.
How is that even possible that we don't know?
Yeah, I mean, for normies, we call them, people that aren't around it all the time. It's sometimes it can be very difficult, to identify those little cues. Some people are really good at hiding it. We call those like functional addicts and alcoholics. But in the end, it always comes out. Okay. It does. It always ends up coming to the surface because it's a progressive illness. It gets worse, never better.
Okay.
Right. So as long as the substance user continuously uses, they're going to need more and more and more to get the same effect. Right. We call that tolerance. Okay. Right. They can become dependent, which is a physiologic thing. Right. Physiologic dependent. So without their substance,
right, you feel like you're going to die almost. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have the physiologic piece, we have the psychological piece, and it's gonna it's gonna come out whether it's going to cost an insane amount of money to keep that up. You're going to have to start resorting to crime, and most crime in the United States is as a result of has some correlation to drugs. Right. Whether people are stealing to get money for drugs, right, people are getting caught with drugs. It's most of it revolves around drugs.
Right. Actually, I was recently speaking at an event, a real estate event, and we've been talking about a crime spree that's been happening in New Jersey. Yeah. Kids are going in, and they're stealing vehicles, stealing fobs, and they're not even deterred by the cameras. Yeah. And I do believe it's some sort of organized crime that's exploiting them, because they don't really get any sort of punishment. It's just kind of a slap on the wrist community service. And I think there's definitely always some sort of element of substance or crime involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, so. Absolutely, 100%.
What is the relationship between single parents and substance abuse? Well, I guess we kind of...
Yeah, but
were you hiding it? I mean, at all for your situation, or were you?
No, I had a difficult time hiding it. Because my drug was, very powerful drug. I was doing heroin and methamphetamine. It's hard to hide that. So.
What were you doing for work at this point? Like how?
So I was able to maintain a job for a while, but it wasn't because I loved what I do or anything like that. It was a means to get high. So it wasn't it wasn't a job so I can make money. It was a job so I can afford my habit. Wow. Right. So it wasn't out of a necessity to sustain myself. It was out of a necessity to stay loaded. Okay. So I didn't look at it as a job. It was I need to get loaded, so I have to go to this place. Right. And I worked there for I think 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was I was able to do it.
What is an average drug habit cost?
Oh geez.
I mean, groceries I'm probably paying $150 a week. I mean, what does it actually cost?
Yeah, so I think at one point for myself I was probably spending close to maybe $1,000 a week.
Oh my gosh.
Or more. And the scary thing now is with fentanyl, it's so cheap, it's so potent, and it's so it's so deadly that these kids and young adults, they're able to stay high easily now because $20 in fentanyl is equivalent to what $500 in heroin would have been. Wow. So it's easier and it's more accessible, and it's I almost see no more heroin now. It's crazy because 6 years ago, all I was detoxing people from was heroin.
Wow.
It was the heroin epidemic, right? Heroin epidemic. Now, I rarely ever see anyone that's using heroin. It's all fentanyl, which is so deadly.
Is this stuff coming into the country, or is it being made within the United States?
No, most of it's coming in, and it's scary because there's so many different analogs of the drug now that are coming in. There's fentanyl, normal Percocet, Oxycontin, fentanyl, we know how long it's going to stay in the system. We know, hey, we can start detoxing this person at this point. Okay. With the fentanyl coming in, there's so many different chemicals that are going into it. Sometimes we see people, it lasts in their system for 7 to 10 days. So we don't know when to start detoxing this person, right? We can give them a medication and, throw them into violent precipitated withdrawal syndrome. Okay. They could have protracted withdrawals. So they're withdrawing for, weeks on end. So they're putting all this stuff in the drugs now, and it's killing people very quick. I've worked with
what age group? I was going to ask you what age group.
Oh geez, so I worked with a mother not that long ago. 12-year-old overdosed and died on fentanyl. The kid thought it was a Xanax. So it's coming. So
they're getting it from the schools or something. Are they getting?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's going around in the schools.
Okay.
And it's very hard to get these kids and adults off this drug. It's very powerful. very powerful. I described it as people like, what does it feel like? What does an opiate feel like? It feels like a warm hug. That always feels good. Okay. So it's very comforting. So, and it's one of those drugs where there's no ceiling. So essentially, you can be upping your dose forever, right? You can always be using more, and you'll always need more to get the same effect. But the interesting thing is, how they always say you're chasing the first high, right? Everyone says that, like, yes. Oh, we're chasing the first high you ever got. The first time that we usually use drugs or alcohol, the environment in which we live in, that's going to determine that first memory of the drug. So you're always going to remember how salient that first experience is. You only get the first experience once. Okay. So if you remember the first time you drank alcohol or got drunk, like if it was a really good experience, you with all your friends, maybe stuff was going on in your life then, had some discord with your parents, and that salience of that alcohol event is going to be very good, right? So then we have euphoric recall. When we think back about the event, we actually produce some of the same chemicals,
My goodness.
So that's tough. That's what we call craving, and it's interesting because even we get mice, you get them dependent on alcohol. Put the saucer in the cage, they drink the alcohol, they get the dopamine spike. Towards the end of the experiments, you don't even have to put the alcohol in the cage anymore, right? They get it. You can put it like outside the cage. Like just them knowing or them thinking about the event can actually elicit some of the same chemical response.
So are you more predisposed to actually using the drug because of your home environment?
Yeah, heck yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, so then why don't some of us...
You're more predisposed to have a higher dopamine release event. Therefore, it's going to be more important because dopamine is the determiner on how important something is, or how salient it is, how valuable it is, right? Okay. So if you're going through a really tough home life and you drink alcohol or use drugs, the dopamine release event is going to be huge because you're already down so low, right? So you have the event, the amygdala stores it, it goes through this area of the brain, the ventral tegmental area, and then there's an ultimate release in this part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, and that's where all drugs of abuse or any addictive behavior, that's where they exert the dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens. And depending on what substance you use and what you're going through at the time, that's going to determine how salient that experience is, and the amygdala is going to say it's going to be saved, right? It's going to be like, oh wow, this is worth 10 dopamine, this is very good, we're going to remember this experience, right? And then you can think back at it and you have euphoric recall. You actually start producing the chemicals. That's why I talk to a lot of addicts and alcoholics. If they're withdrawing, even their drug dealer knocking on the door,
it releases.
I feel better, right? They already feel better. They already feel like they're out of it because some of the dopamine release actually precedes the use.
Wow.
Right? So you go into this like euphoric recall, right? So interesting.
It's almost like getting psyched up for when you're either going on a vacation or something exciting. Yeah. Or is it psychosomatic or what is?
Yeah, definitely. It's like if you've eaten at a very good restaurant, you start salivating before, right? You start like really thinking about how good this, whatever the meal you had there was. It's the same thing. Anything that's good or bad, right? You assign a valuation to it, right? A valuation is assigned, right? So if you ate something real crappy as a kid, like you're gonna remember that. I don't like that, because your body has that recall. Okay, well let's get the let's get the senses involved. We want to get the stomach involved, right? So we have somatic senses. We have all the sensory stuff, right? All that stuff, all the senses. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, would you like to talk more about your situation with your daughter, or how does a person go from having a substance abuse to an involved parent?
Yeah, definitely. So treatment.
And where you are today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like some people say like just like a light switches off or a light bulb, switches. Yeah. But I think for me, it's like, I'm ADHD, so like I've always been very creative. I've always been able to get by. I've always been imaginative. I've always had lots of energy. I've always been passionate. It's like I was never able to give myself or afford myself the opportunity to find something I loved.
Yes.
Right? I think once I found something I loved, which was like helping people in addiction medicine, like I went into like a rabbit hole for like 10 years. I went to school, got my doctorate. It's like, and the passion's still there, right? I think it's all about finding that thing, right? So when we have kids, like myself, like I wasn't able to discover my thing, you know, I wasn't able to discover what I loved,
yes.
you know, because I was always on edge, I was always in fear, you know, I was always worried. Like I didn't get a chance to really be myself, caretaking my parents,
right,
role reversal. I never got a chance to really, like, you know, find my hobbies, interests, and, you know, what I really had a passion for. Once I found that, it was like everything in my life did a 180.
Wow.
Right. And it was more about, and I always been focused on, you know, what I can get, you know, like how can I make that much money? How can I get that car? How can I get that girl?
Wow.
You know, and when my mindset shifted to what can I give? You know, what do I have to offer? How can I help people?
Right.
Then my life became abundantly full, right? Because I think people do it backwards oftentimes, right? They try to get all this stuff from out here to make them feel better in here. Right? When really, if you feel good in here, it reflects out here.
Absolutely.
Right? The whole outside looks better when you start from in here.
Right?
Right? The stuff from out here isn't going to make you feel better for that long. Temporarily, right? Like the drugs, like, you know, getting a huge paycheck. Yeah, you may feel good for a little while.
Right.
But, you know, the real happiness it starts in here. And I remember when I met my wife, and my current wife, we have 2 kids. I met her in treatment,
oh,
you
wow.
know, so don't recommend that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I remember when we moved in together, we were in like a little room in my mom's house. You know, we were so poor. We didn't have anything. But you know what I do remember is how content we were, right? And how happy we were. And that's never changed, you know. And that's like really when I realized it's not about what you're getting, it's really about what you have to offer. And that's where like you feel full and content. Because even though I was living in a little, you know, crappy house, we had like a Honda Accord with a bumper hanging off it, 2 kids, you know, we were pouring water into our daughter's milk because we couldn't afford, you know, to use milk, you know, at the time. And
did you know about WIC or anything back then?
No, because I didn't because I'm such a control, like I wanted to do it on my own. Like I didn't want any handouts at all. Like everything like I've done for myself, I did it like from the ground up. I've never asked for freaking anything. So when we had the conversation, I was like, babe, I don't want the government's help. I don't want anyone's help, you know, nothing, you know. And it's so like liberating to walk into your home, and like even if it's, you know, when we had a little home, to look around and be like, you know what, I work for everything in here, every single thing.
No place like home, like your own stuff. I wanted you to speak to that a little bit, because I talked to single parents about the importance of the kids' emotional needs, and also the fact that you need to be independent and you don't need a partner. For you, growing up in a home with your parents not meeting your needs probably created some of this desire, I will do it for myself, in maybe what you call selfishness, but it was you needing to get your needs met. What was it like? Were your parents actually still together and still married, and you grew up with them? They were both alcoholics, or did they divorce? What was the experience like? Were you hungry? Like...
So my childhood, well, I thought my childhood was, everyone thinks it's normal when you grow up with it, right? I mean, it's like people that go back to the same toxic relationship, you know, it's like I said, you dance with the devil, you know, dance with, it's a comfortable hell. So like, you don't know what abnormal is when you grow up in it your whole life. Like that's your normal, right?
What was your normal? What did your normal look like?
My normal, so my dad was a raging alcoholic, drank and used, you know, drugs all the time. My mom had like huge bouts of sobriety with relapses. My mom's been sober like 15 years now, God bless her. But towards the end of my parents' relationship, I think they split up when I was 17. My mom had relapsed on heroin. You know, I remember her just like wheeling stuff out the garage to sell it. And, you know, my father was just in an oblivion all the time, and we ended up leaving the house.
So your mother technically was a single parent at periods.
Yeah, we left and we moved into a little apartment, and, you know, I was helping pay rent, and yeah, it was definitely, there was a lot of chaos in the house, always on edge, always in fear. I spent a lot of time in my room. I spent a lot of time alone, and I realized like that really hindered that nurture thing that I talked about.
That's right.
Because like I had such a problem connecting with others. Like I always felt inadequate, did not feel comfortable in my own skin, felt ugly, felt misplaced, felt like, you know, I didn't fit in. Like I always felt like that. It was like inherent, you know, it was like, I don't know what it was, but it was because I never learned how to have relationships. right? So I always felt awkward in school. I always felt like the odd man out, you know, apart from, not a part of. I felt all those things to my core, right? To my core, because, you know, that I never got to learn, you know, how to bond with my parents and then reciprocate that into other relationships. But, you know, what I do know is the first time I drank alcohol and I was with a group of people, I finally felt like I fit in. I finally felt good enough. I finally felt adequate. I finally felt good looking. I finally felt like I can talk. Like I finally felt all the things I ever wanted. Wow. Right. So all that, you know, I finally felt content. Like, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Right. This is what it's supposed to feel like, you know? And then that's what I wanted. Right. You know, that's what I chased. This is what it's supposed to feel like, right? I didn't know that, you know, there was lots of other things I can do to not feel like that.
And even, you know, the same behavior that happens when parents are using substances happen when parents are actually working a lot of hours. You're also neglecting your children. And these same feelings of inadequacy that you're describing happen when we work too much. And I actually speak to single parents in my book, 10 Things I Wish I Knew as a Single Parent, that you really need to stop working so much for this purpose. One, you're putting your kids at risk of many things. And when you feel inadequate, you're going to go seek out other friends, other people using things, doing things, sex, whatever, to medicate yourself. And we have to be home. Yeah. And you felt it while living with your mother, so living with your parents. And always like, Anita, I got to take care of myself. I grew up actually thinking the same way.
I believe, as I was previously saying, using that substance is what made me feel connected, right? It's what made me feel a part of. It's what made me feel like I fit in. All of that, the stuff that I wanted, it made me fit in. What I now know is that for children, and I know you're talking about earlier, like working too much and those kind of things, like we need to create an environment so our kids are able to express themselves, right? Very important. Our kids are able to try different things. I think that's very important, that we support them on those different ventures, that we're supportive, because all the things I talked about in that nurture piece, right? Helping them feel like they fit in, helping them feel like they can form emotional relationships, and supporting them in their activities, that's gonna benefit them in those things, right? Like social activities, because think about it, okay? When you're 7 years old and you lose a basketball tournament or something like that, that's the end of the world for you, right? I mean, that's a huge emotional thing for a 7-year-old, right? That's kind of stuff, and having a parent there to support you, hey, good job, you did the best you could, like, that's going to prepare them later on down the road when they have their first breakup, you know, when they have their, you know, go through their first thing, right? Instead of like never giving them a safe space to experience some of that stuff, right? And be able to learn how to walk through it with grace, and know how to walk, you know that things are going to be all right, and know that they'll recover from that, and you know, and so we want to create and foster that kind of environment. And I believe you know, getting them involved in extracurriculars, or letting them get involved with you know, arts and music and stuff like that, gives them a good outlet to be able to kind of go through those things.
Right. These are some of the things I talk about. I actually talk about giving the kids freedom, and I talk about stories where children have built businesses as children. So feeling like you're in a safe environment where you can trust others, you can depend on them, they're going to be there for you. Did you feel safe growing up? Because I know I never felt like I could depend on anybody.
Yeah, I never felt like, you know, I never felt like I could depend on anyone. Even, you know, even now, like, I see traits of it in my life today. You know, like, I want control. Like, I don't want to give up control. I'm a big control freak, you know. I'm like, hey, God, let me just watch your back real quick. I want to make sure that this goes right, you know. So, like, I'm, like, double checking God's work, you know, making sure that, you know, he's going to be all right, and I'm setting him up, you know, like, so that's the kind of, you know, control freak I am. And that's just because, you know, my life was so out of control.
Right. Is it ever possible to manage that? Or is it always sort of, you never completely recover from it? You're just always kind of managing it? Or
I think there's certain things that come up in certain situations that bring you back into that state that you were in.
Trigger?
Yeah, like a trigger or a reminder or a cue, right? We talk, you know, I talk more about cues than triggers. There are certain cues that you'll have that maybe you're not even aware of, right? So maybe somebody walks by you a certain way, or maybe a certain individual looks like someone like an assailant for some people, you know, they see someone that looks like one of their assailants, or just little cues that come up, and then they revert you back into, you know, some of the protective defense mechanisms that you've relied on for so long. And you never know when those defense mechanisms are going to come back up. But yeah, some of those things, they don't go away. You can be more insightful, like, oh, you know what I'm realizing right now? Like, I'm realizing that, you know, I'm very defensive. I feel very controlling because, hey, maybe my dad used to talk to me like that. Right. Or, you know, maybe my mom used to talk to me like that. Mm-hmm. And the way I, you know, the way that, you know, I'm interpreting what you're saying, you know, is being processed in a manner of which they used to speak to me like.
Right.
So then you know, those things come up.
What is the difference in the language? Why is that language so important between using a cue versus a trigger? How is that different?
I just don't like the word trigger because I think it's overused, and you know, like, it's like everything's triggering, you know, yeah. Like I'm like, everything is, you know, they're all cues, right? And cues are things that you can grow from, like recognize, why am I feeling this way? Why am I having this reaction? You know, let's examine it a little further. Let's go past the frontal lobe, you know, let's see, you know, what environment or conditions did I grow up in that can make this like such a big deal to me, or make me evoke such an emotional response, you know, like anger, fear, joy, passion, love, guilt, shame. I mean, you name it.
Right.
So when those things come up and you're in a situation, it's a good tool to do like a little self-appraisal, you know, why is this such a joyous moment? Oh, you know, maybe because I remember, you know, hanging out with my grandma at this time, you know, and we were doing the same thing. We were, you know, roasting marshmallows in the campfire, and now I'm roasting marshmallows with you, you know, yes. And that's, you know, and you can kind of have some insights like that, right? And you can do the same with basically anything. So I think cues are an opportunity, not something that we should run from. We shouldn't run from triggers and things like that. We need to move into them and, you know, try to dissect them. And you're never going to understand completely the potpourri of things that have happened to you, and exactly, you know, what event, you know, tipped you over. And I don't think it's important. You know, I think people spend so much time in therapy, you know, what happened in my childhood exactly, you know, to make me behave the way I do. Like, you're never going to figure that out. Right. It could have been 3 million things combined, you know, it's just, you know, so it's not as important to, you know, figure out exactly what. It's more important to kind of see the overarching theme, you know, okay, there's a lot of abandonment. Okay, here's why, you know, I'm, you know, like I hate you, don't leave me, you know, type of person in a relationship, right. You know, right. So understanding those overarching themes is more important with those cues, right? And then recognizing those, and then my biggest thing, honestly, to fix those things is, and it goes back to what I was talking about with the mirror neurons. You know how we learn all that behavior? Right. It's all learned, right? We imitate before we understand. Right. We surround ourselves with people that have things that we want. Good relationship, mm-hmm. Good business ethic, good financial, you know, right. Practices. Right, and what we do, and like for alcoholics, a right. sponsor, right? Because
every cue is not negative.
No.
For me, my cues are like childhood trauma. Yeah. Anytime I see a story about a child being abused, hurt, you know, murdered, yeah. Or child sex trafficking, yeah. That's going on, like I just honestly can't take it.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, and I said I've got to just get the word out. I literally cannot handle it. Yeah. And I suppose that's because I was abused as a child. Yeah. But is there a point where that becomes too much, and you have to realize you can only solve or save so many people, solve so many problems, or save so many people? Like, I'm at the point I want to go out in the street and help prostitutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not kidding. Literally. Yeah. There's an area in Florida that I really want to try to get them off the street and help. Is there a point where you need to know your own limitations there, or
when it starts to, like what you said, affect your time at home and affect your, you know, your own, the way you're raising your own kids, yes, and putting yourself in harm's way. But you know, I think the ultimate goal of someone like you, someone like me, is the goal is to help as many people as I can. Right. Humanly possible. And you know, sometimes that puts us in very precarious situations. Oftentimes for me it does. Because I work in such a, you know, I work in mental health, so you know, you get into some situations, but
you mean situations where you're trying to help and they don't want the help, and you are just heartbroken because they're not.
Yeah, well, you can't work harder than the client. You know, I always tell people that. Or I'm going to pick up people on the side, you know, from a Burger King at 2 a.m. to take them to treatment. You know, like stuff like that, because there's a saying, in AA, like when the phone rings, you have to answer it. Like it's service work. And when I was in need, somebody picked up the phone for me. So it's my responsibility to pick up the phone. It's like it's not like I can't. It's like I have to, right? And we talk about it all the time. It's like you have to give it away to keep it. That's what we talk about. That's like one of the slogans, right? And to keep that sense of freedom. And I told you, it's more about what I have to offer and what I have to give. Right. Like you have to be in a place to where you're able to be able to do that, because you can't just take. Like I want all the good stuff too, Right. But like I gotta be able to have that ability to pick up the phone and be able to help people, because that's what's given me everything I've gotten. And
are there any boundaries there? I mean, especially boundaries between the single parent that doesn't have the substance abuse issue and the one that does. I mean, where are the boundaries between, for us who want to just save the world, and then single parents and...
So number one, you gotta look at, obviously physical safety is like number one, right? You don't want your ex or significant other maybe, driving around intoxicated with your child. Right. That's like, so physical safety is obviously number one. And then we look at routine is very important for children. Yeah. So making sure that, that parent just isn't popping in and out whenever they want, if they're, if you're divorced, making sure there's like, we don't want to keep the child.
How do you navigate that with the court system? I'm curious, how do you do that?
Because if we don't, I'm talking like if there's like set parenting schedules, it's like, you got to and there's a reason for those, because we know that the more routine there is in a child's life, the better the outcome's going to be. There's going to be less anxiety, depression, oppositional behavior, stuff like that if there's routine and schedule. So there is something to be said about, that stuff, having boundaries with that. Like if parent doesn't show up on his scheduled day, like, no, you don't get another day. You come on your next scheduled day, and if they're showing up intoxicated, stuff like that. We want those kind of boundaries are there to protect, like, the emotional safety for sure.
And that actually helps create some level of normalcy with the children, I suppose.
Yeah. And then as they grow up, they can realize, mom wasn't keeping me from dad. It's like dad didn't show up to his visits, or it's like you're not, you're doing everything you can, but you also want your kids to have normalcy.
Right.
So if dad doesn't show up for his visit on Wednesdays, that's, ultimately the child will grow up and understand that had nothing to do with, mom trying to keep dad away from me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And that can be a very difficult thing for families. I know when I was a single parent, it was like constantly struggling with guilt over the absent parent. You're always trying to compensate through finances, time, everything, and you certainly can't do it. What do you do when that's it? Obviously you're keeping the boundaries, you try to create normalcy, but you're just constantly struggling with guilt, I guess.
And it's, there's a lot of...
how much you disclose to the kids? Like, what do you tell people at that point?
There's a lot of I know it's very like uncharted water for a lot of people, and obviously like you want to protect the anonymity as best as possible of that other person, especially if they're they're seeking help, and so you don't want to there's no need to go notify the school board that dad's using cocaine. Hey,
send a news.
My ex is using cocaine. Just want everyone to know that. So there is a sense of like protecting that person a little bit, especially if they're trying to get help. If they're trying to show up to the school and pick up the kid drunk, then maybe the school needs to know. Okay. But it also protects the child, because as a child we get our identity from our parents. Right. And if that's why we don't badmouth the other parent, like dad's a piece of crap, then the child's gonna be like, well, I must be a piece of crap because I'm from dad, or that's, we gotta watch out for that kind of stuff too, right? That's another big one I see too, is usually the addicted parent is like, mom's trying to keep you from me, and then they feel the child feels a sense of abandonment, because they get their identity from their parent,
What do you do in that situation where one is not exactly telling the truth and you're trying to keep the family life stable and you're probably feeling guilty at the same time because one of the parents is not in the home? Yeah. How do you maintain, I guess, an adequate relationship? Try to discipline the children at the same time? Because, you have a tall order now. So
yeah, it's difficult. Again, the most important thing is just having routine, structure, and what physical safety first and emotional safety. Right. I think you obviously physical safety, emotional safety, routine, in that order. I think you fare pretty well, a good chance, no matter who you are.
Some of the things I did with my kids was we would go to the gym. We would be part of a local gym. You feel like you're part of the community, churches, whatever, and you definitely, and boys and girls clubs. Yeah. And actually, the funny thing is, going to these programs actually prevents kids from getting trafficked too. Yeah. So,
connection. I mean, they're making connection, and like I talked about a little earlier. I think the most important thing is connection. Connection is so important. Yes. Especially whether you're an addicted parent and you're getting sober and you need to learn how to be a parent. So what I did is I hung out with someone that was a very good parent, right? And what I did is I asked them questions. They didn't co-sign my BS. They would tell me, hey, that's not a good idea. You shouldn't do that. Maybe you should do this. Try this. And after a while, you think more like these people that make good choices. You start to make high-level decisions, and you start to have results like them. And that goes in everything. Mm-hmm. That goes, in business and life coaching and fitness. Like, you're gonna want to listen to a trainer that looks like they're in shape and they know what they're doing, right? You want to take their advice. And
that's actually one of the biggest ways I learned the proper way to raising children was actually watching intact families, and see how they raise their children, ones who care about them. It's just life-changing, You
can't just wing it. Just like if you're starting a business, you don't just wing it, right? You want to pick people's brains. You want to do, you want honest feedback. And that's the same thing with somebody struggling with another parent that is an addict. We go to Al-Anon, right? Which is basically you live with an addicted partner or child, and they teach you oh, here's how to set boundaries. Here's what to do. Here's what not to do. And they're very supportive instead of you just trying to figure it out. Oh, should I let him come back? Drunk. He said he's going to change this time. Someone in Al-Anon might say, well, how about you tell him to stay sober for 30 days and then come knock on the door and then we'll talk, very tough decisions that sound very logical when you're got a 10,000 foot view, but when you're in it, it's very, it's oh, what am I doing?
Well, there's a dynamic in the family. It's not just the person with the substance abuse that's the problem. Everybody within that family has been affected by the situation. Whether you use the substance or not, you're still emotionally damaged in some way, probably.
Absolutely. And the kids are definitely, because everyone takes on a different role, right? Everyone takes on a different role. Right. There's the disengaged one, which was, mostly me. Then there's the caretaking one, which is my sister, and then there was the lost child, which was my little brother, so everyone has this illness, pretty much, right. So my little brother, he was the youngest one when all of this stuff was going on. I think he was 9 or 10, right? He didn't even finish 7th grade, I don't think. And so he was the lost child. And then
what is that? What is the lost child?
The lost child's the one that never really got to participate in team sports. Never got to go on go spend a day with dad, spend a day with mom, go on the family vacations. I got to do some of that stuff because there was intermittent periods of sobriety earlier on, but he was probably too young.
Caretaker. Are they the ones that just kind of take, it's all my fault, I've got to rescue the whole family?
They're the ones that are usually providing the emotional support for the parent, and it should never be like that. Parents should be providing emotional support to the child. Worrying about finances, taking ownership of household duties like dishes and laundry. A 9-year-old probably shouldn't be worried about getting the laundry done.
My husband was driving at the age of 9. Yeah. He had to be responsible for the family. Yeah. Working, giving up his pay and all sorts of other things. So.
Yeah, a 12-year-old shouldn't be holding a bucket next to the bed for their mom to throw up in, right? Those are the kind of role reversals that we see, right? And then...
describe a healthy family. What does a healthy family look like?
That's tough because I've never been. healthy family looks like a family that spends adequate quality time with each other. A healthy family has their children engaged in extracurriculars, has their children not truant, obviously going to school. Everyone's able to express themselves in a different way. So maybe one kid likes dance, the other kid likes art, right?
You don't become the scapegoat because you asked a question.
or family dinners are big, right? Eating dinner as a family at least a couple times a week. Healthy outlets to discuss problems, conversations that should be had with kids, like about sex, about drugs.
Absolutely.
when it's
finance, anything.
It's age appropriate. Right. Those kind of conversations need to be had. So those all look like more more of a healthy family dynamic when those things are able to happen. The quality time, the important talks, walking somebody through a breakup, first breakup, or walking somebody through their first relationship, or walking somebody through the first time that maybe they experimented with alcohol. I mean, we got to understand that like most of our kids are probably going to drink. I mean, it's probably going to happen at some point. And just being able to, like I said, set the stage so the environment and circumstances don't lead that to be a very salient experience that they seek to replicate all the time. Right?
They should be able to make a mistake, and it's not a
or
tragedy.
Or not even a mistake where they drink alcohol and they don't feel the huge sense of ease and comfort that somebody that's grown up in a broken home feels. Right? Somebody that grows up in a normal home without all the chaos, they may drink alcohol and they may feel like a little buzz, but they're not going to be like, I felt like, oh my God, I fit in. This is what it's supposed to feel like. I feel like I feel like I've always been holding my breath underwater and now I finally came up from air. Like normal people don't feel like that. They have a drink.
I remember Tony Robbins telling a story. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think his mother made him drink a 6-pack. He said he wanted to be like dad or something, and she made him drink it all. Now, is that a good technique? I don't know. To get kids not to. Okay. And he never wanted to drink again after that, he claims. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because I think it ruined the experience at the time for beer. But that's not to say that some other unhealthy habit, can rear its ugly. Like gambling, right? I mean,
true.
Pulling down the lever and seeing all sevens, you're getting a huge spike of dopamine too. I'm a winner. This is what it feels like to win. Like I've never won anything. I've never been capable of winning. I've never been good enough to win. Like in people, hitting all sevens, or winning something, you may feel all that stuff. It may be very salient.
Right.
You may go sit in the casino and feel all those things, and then you hit the sevens, and boom, you're off to the races.
So just because you're not using drugs doesn't mean you don't have some other addictive behavior within you.
Yeah, absolutely. And rears its ugly head in all sorts of ways. Okay. Sex, gambling,
food, anything.
Yeah, food, toxic relationships. Like I said, usually what I see in these situations with these children that grow up in these homes is they tend to get into the same type. It's cyclical. They get into the same relationship. It's like, my dad was gone all the time. He was neglectful. He was never around. And it's like the thing I want more than anything in the world is to be with somebody that's not like that. Boom, here's Mr. Good Looking over here. And what they'll do is they'll try so hard to hold on to that relationship. He'll be out doing whatever he's doing, leaving, coming home drunk, cheating, all sorts of stuff, and but they can't let that go because their dad abandoned them, right? And they can't have that, right? They want more than anything, and that's where you see the book, like, I hate you, don't leave me. You start to see those borderline traits, right? Which is just maladaptive attachment stuff. And the one thing they want more than anything in the world not to have, that's what they end up,
I remember being in therapy one time. Actually, I had to take an anger management. I was very angry, a very angry teenager, very violent too. And she said to me, the reason you're getting into these kind of relationships is because of your religious beliefs. They're so extreme. I grew up Muslim, and then I grew up in organized religions. And she said they're so extreme, you're actually attracting these kind of people, as an outlet. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
Yeah. I've never heard that before, but that's what she said.
Yeah. Or if you grew up in an angry household.
I did, very angry household.
Yeah. So
militant, actually.
Yeah. So if you grew up in a militant household, you're probably going to have militant-like behaviors. And like I said, right, we imitate before we understand. So we may imitate a very bad behavior and not understand why we do it. Why am I doing this? Why do I do this? I don't know why I do this. It's like sometimes we never get to that understanding, which is very bad. You don't want to get to that, at least you want to get past that. Okay, I'm imitating this behavior I've learned growing up, and I'm understanding why I do it, and here's what I can do to change it. Surround myself with, you got to relearn it, right? If we're imitating behavior from what we're learning, we got to go back to child. So to do that, what we do is we get a sponsor, we get someone that knows business, we get someone that knows finance, right? And then we start imitating again, right? And then you start to understand, wow, these are different results I'm getting, instead of blowing up, like I'm doing this, or, and that's the same thing with, like Alcoholics Anonymous. Hey, why don't you try this?
Well, you spoke about you and your wife, like you were, I guess, struggling.
Oh yeah, big time.
Big time. You moved in with your mom.
Yeah, we ended up living in like a 400 square foot apartment with our 2 kids for a while. It was.
How do you go from that, from your previous life of out of control to building an empire? So building this amazing practice.
I think, and like I said, the most important thing was finding something that I was passionate about, and a way that I can help others. Like my biggest thing was how can I take people from this, hopeless and helpless state of being, and them realize that they have all the power and capabilities within them to be anything they want. So for me, my mindset was, and this is analogy I love to use, like when I was out there using, like I stayed high every day no matter what. Like I got drugs. It didn't matter how the hell. Committed. Okay, like I was committed. Like I would get drugs no matter what every day. So what I did is I kind of reframed that into like, I'm going to treat every goal like my bag of dope for the day. Wow. Every little goal, like get enrolled in school, like, get this little piece of debt paid off, do that. And every day I had a new bag of dope, like a different bag of dope.
Wow.
And my mindset was like, I knew I could get high every day. It's like, why can't I achieve this little goal every single day? And when I think back at it now, and there were so many things stacked against me too, it was insane. So in 2013, I've been sober almost 10 years now. I overdosed in May 2013, and like I died. Like I show people the records all the time when I speak. It's like I came to the hospital, it was like cessation of breathing, all this other stuff. When I went to treatment that last time, they told me my insurance ran out, so they were gonna have to kick me out of treatment. What they did is he allowed me to stay, he scholarshiped me. 1 year into sobriety, I had a CPS case open. My rights were severed from my oldest daughter. So I ended up losing her. She ended up going into foster care.
What age was she?
She was, I think, 6. Tough.
And you've never seen her since?
My mom ended up adopting her down the road. But I mean, like, I can never take that back. I went through that in sobriety. I applied to go to school. They wouldn't accept me because of my criminal record, because I was using.
Oh, so you actually got arrested for
I've been arrested. Yeah, I've been arrested plenty of times. So, and
you're not the only one.
I didn't have any money to like, get a lawyer to expunge my charges.
Yes.
So like I studied law for 6 months, and like I got the charges set aside myself, and I help people do it all the time now. I learned how to set aside my own charges, set aside my charges. Then I reapplied to school. They said, hey, you can't go here because we need all transcripts from every school you've ever attended, and you ripped off this school for like $20,000. So then I had to spend a year paying back this school, and I only made $10 an hour.
And you were literally just in pain. It was not that you were trying to hurt anybody.
No.
You were just in pain.
Yeah, exactly. And, so I had to pay back that. And then like I finally got, it was tough. And I worked 6 12s a week while I was in school, all the way through grad school, but it was the, I was so motivated and so passionate about what I was doing that like I was like a freight train,
Yes.
I was.
Well, what was the doctor he was talking about recently? High functioning ADHD, and how it actually helps you for business.
Yeah,
yes.
Holloway. Ned Holloway.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a lot of talking with him at the last convention I was at, and I've reached out to him. But yeah, he was talking about how when harnessed, high functioning ADHD can be like a superpower.
Yeah.
Right? So we have imagination, we have creativity, we have energy, we have all the things, and most entrepreneurs have this.
Right.
Like we're all a little like cuckoo. We all have the flight of ideas and right?
And it just has to be channeled like that. Putting people in jail for some sort of drug use or whatever, it's not solving anything.
No.
I mean, certain cases like Andre, obviously people are going to school, they're learning and stuff, but you're really not helping the situation. No. You just needed a direction, right?
I needed guidance. To find my thing.
Yeah, and your thing. Is finding your thing the best way to stop?
Yeah, and to find your thing, you got to try many things, like Ned Holloway was saying.
You can stop using substances by just finding what you're passionate about.
Finding what you're passionate about, you know, finding what, it is, because obviously, you know, you're passionate about using and feeling good. You just got to find another way to feel good.
Right.
Right. And for most people, I mean, for most people, unless they're narcissists or
I wasn't going to bring that up,
but we feel good by helping others.
Yeah, we do.
You know, if you can find the best way that you can be utilized to help other people, like that is going to be by far and away the best drug you'll ever do.
Okay.
You get the biggest. I get the biggest.
We don't need a war on drugs, a war on sex. No. We need to just help people find their thing.
Find your thing, you know. And I get the biggest dopamine hit ever, like scholarshiping someone to treatment, or giving free healthcare. Like I remember I was online, I was giving free healthcare away, and this guy called me from this company, and he had me come in, and he actually offered me a job right off the bat for almost $250,000 a year. I still have that job because I was giving away free visits on Facebook. And I still got that job, you know, $250,000 a year, you know, just found me on Facebook, just giving away visits, right? Most of these people I've met, you know, just because, you know, I think I met Chris because I was coming in to speak at the detox that he had like 5 years ago.
Wow.
You know, down in Sun City. I would just go there and speak, you know, I would go there every Tuesday and just share my story.
You were the most genuine person I met. You didn't ask me for anything when I met you. We weren't selling each other anything, and it was just the absolute beautiful conversation and relationship.
Yeah,
so
thank you. Appreciate that.
And I appreciate your willingness to come out to New Jersey.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, I'm going to go meet with Dr. Robbie because it was so genuine. Thank you. Thanks for being you.
Thank you. I appreciate you being you and all you're doing out there to you know, spread the word and help people, you know, realize that they can be what they want. Yeah. And that's despite any circumstances, whether single or having an addicted other parent, that, you know, they're able to overcome